Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted. Because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I felt like that parent, then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. So today's guest is Dr. Joanne Foster. She's a parent, teacher, gifted education expert, educational consultant, and multiple award-winning author of lots of books, including the recently released Being Smart About Gifted Learning, Empowering Parents and Kids Through Challenge and Change, who she co-authored with Donna Matthews. And Joanne focuses on supporting and encouraging children's well-being, including their intelligence, creativity, productivity, and self-confidence. So it's an absolute delight to have you with us today, Joanne. Thank you so much, all the way from Florida.
Well, today I'm in Florida, yes. Typically I'm in Toronto, which is my hometown, but we traveled down here for a little break, and it's actually quite pleasant to have the warmth and the palm trees, so I'm appreciating.
Yeah, a big change from the snow back at home.
You said it, exactly.
So you've had quite the distinguished career in giftedness with just decades of experience. And I'm wondering, how did you get started in this particular area?
Interesting question. I was a teacher for several years, and one day my principal called me in and said that we are going to start a gifted program in our area, and we'd like you to look after it. And I said, well, okay, that sounds interesting, but I don't have any training in gifted education. And he said, well, you're creative, you'll figure it out. So I went home that night and I thought about it, and I thought, okay, it's an opportunity. It's different. I like creativity. I like challenge. I'll do it. So I started reading up as much as I possibly could. This was back in the 1980s. And I took this class and I loved it. Children were excited to be there. They were dynamic in terms of their connections with each other. They came from different schools and they came to me every afternoon. And in the morning, I taught my normal math and English in the junior high school. And then I continued on in the field. I became a consultant. Learned everything I could. I got a master's degree in special education and adaptive instruction with a focus on gifted, and I went on to get a doctoral degree in human development and applied psychology, again with a focus on gifted, and I just kept at it. I went to every conference I could go to. I read everything I could. I researched, I wrote, and over the years I've learned more. I'm a lifelong learner, and I share whatever knowledge I possibly can in order to be able to help other people navigate this rather tricky landscape.
Yeah, definitely tricky. And wow, that's quite the journey. So you started off as a teacher, and like many teachers, even now, not having the background, and then just finding your way through a whole lot of research.
I also taught at the University of Toronto in the teacher education program. So I taught gifted education and educational psychology. And that was a real eye-opener for me too, because in a lot of ways, teachers are not necessarily trained to deal in the area of gifted education. So for me, another important aspect of what I did over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And we find that here in Australia as well. Teachers are starting out their careers without that adequate training, the support and knowledge. So that's certainly a difficult place to start from in terms of then having to potentially have gifted kids or being able to identify that a child is gifted. So that kind of interests me. You're obviously, like you said, a lifelong learner and very motivated yourself. And I actually was talking to a parent recently, and they were asking the question of, how do we motivate a child, or particularly a gifted child, who just is not motivated to learn, which I thought was a really interesting question, given that when you think of giftedness, you think of that rage to learn, that kind of intrinsic motivation. But I guess there are times where even gifted kids lose motivation and drive. So how can we help motivate our gifted kids to learn?
I'll give you 2 tips to start with. The first is value attribution. If somebody feels that a particular task or activity is authentically relevant, that it matters, it has value to it, then they're more likely to be motivated by it. And the second has to do with having an optimal match, making sure that the learning and the learner are well matched in terms of what the child can do and what's being asked of them. So the expectations, the actual preparation, the step by step that's required over the long haul, these need to be appropriately matched so that the child feels comfortable around what it is they're expected to do. I'm going to tell you a little story, okay? Because
Yeah.
it maybe it'll illustrate this a little bit. And I write about this in one of my books, in Not Now, Maybe Later. And briefly, it's a story about a little girl named Pauline, and she's in this class, and the teacher has been working on descriptive vocabulary. And the assignment that she gives to the class is that you have to describe a day in the life of something: a beach, a rock, an icy pond, a farmer's field, whatever. And it can either be real or imagined. You pick your locale and you have to write 2 page description. So Pauline goes home and she thinks about it and she says to herself, yeah, like, this is boring. What goes on a rock? What goes on in a field? Like, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. I'm not motivated by it. Forget it. I can do more interesting things than that. And a couple of days later, the teacher's going around the room and she's asking everybody, have you picked your spot? And everybody's saying yes. And someone's saying, oh, I'm going to do a pigsty. And somebody else says, oh, I'm going to do the moon. And someone else says, I'm going to do a golf course. And everybody's all excited. And the teacher gets to Pauline and says, well, what are you going to do? And Pauline, of course, has just written the whole thing off, not interested. It's stupid. And so she quickly comes up with the idea, I'll do the playground across the road from my house. And the teacher says, okay, that's a great idea. Pauline goes home. She talks to her mom and she says, I'm stuck. I have to do this stupid playground. I have to describe it. And I don't want to do this. I don't want to put forth the effort. I'm just not motivated, right? So in this instance, it was just not aligned with what Pauline was wanting to do. But she was stuck. She had to come up with something. So she looked outside her window and she hadn't been in this park for ages. And she thought about it and she saw the swing sets and she saw kids playing and she thought, I wonder what goes on there. Look, there's flowers and the trees look pretty interesting. They've grown over the years. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. And then she decides, well, I'm going to go across the road and actually have a look. And she starts talking to the kids and she sees little plaques and she sees what fun they're having. And she talks to the caregivers and the moms and she looks at what's happening there. And all of a sudden she becomes more interested. And then she starts thinking, listen, there's birds and there's dogs and her senses kick in. And she wonders, well, what happens here at night? Do the flowers close up? Are there lights? Like, what goes on here? And she decides, I'm going to get a tape recorder and I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually tape what goes on here. As she became more invested in the activity, she became more motivated. And ultimately, she did an amazing project. She did a cover page, she did a video, she did a soundtrack. She was excited because she had found a way to make it her own. And I think the lesson here is that if you can help children find something that makes it their own, that they can take responsibility for and feel independent about and connect with other people with as well, because she spoke to people at the park, then that makes a huge difference. If someone really feels that the activity or the task is meaningful and that it suits their ability level and they can make it more interesting for themselves, that will be motivating. Long answer to a short question, but
Yeah, no, and a brilliant answer. There's a sense of justice, which I think links itself to that sense of it's got to have meaning for me. I've got to be able to relate that back to something that I feel is important, which we talk a lot about in terms of that strength-based approach. So that leads me on to a few other questions. As a parent of gifted kids, especially in those early days of coming to terms with, oh my goodness, my child is gifted. What does that mean? The potential gets talked about a lot. Should we be pushing our gifted kids harder and further?
Okay, so first of all, the word potential is really tough. Nobody knows anybody else's potential, really. I mean, we don't have tea leaves, we don't have crystal balls. We have to move forward without trying to put anybody into a box around what their potential may or may not be, because it develops over time with the right opportunities to learn and with the kinds of encouragement and support that kids need in order to thrive. And in terms of pushing kids, I think that we really need to be careful around that, because what we really want to do is support them. We want to support their effort, their journeys, and celebrate the small steps as well as the big ones. Success is really a matter of small increments at a time, small bursts of effort. And sometimes there's bigger bursts too, but not always. So when we push kids, we really have to be patient and we have to enable them to find that value in what they're doing, to ask the questions they need to ask, to have the choices that they need, to have the time, the extra time sometimes, in order to be able to consolidate the learning that they want to do. So supporting as opposed to pushing, I think, is important, and to show faith in their abilities, to have confidence in them, because that will translate into them having confidence in themselves. One of the things that's really important, and this is a word that's probably not on the tip of your tongue, but it's on the tip of mine today, because I just posted an article at the Creativity Post, and the title of the article is tenacity. It's just an 8-letter word, and it's a really easy little word, but it's such an important word. I encourage people just to go to creativitypost.com and take a look. It's on the feature. It was just posted this afternoon. And I talk about how we have to encourage children to push themselves instead of us as parents. And I'm a parent too, and a grandparent. Instead of pushing them, encourage them to find ways to make the learning meaningful for themselves, to have resilience, to allow themselves to have creative expression, to make mistakes by taking sensible risks and know that it's okay. They can get help along the way if they need it. Anyways, I think tenacity is a big helper. It's a helper for parents in terms of supporting their kids, helping them find new ways of being a maverick, of taking the reins, and also helping children find how they themselves can be tenacious and work forwards.
Absolutely. I like that. Tenacity is a great word, like you say, that idea of determination and grit, and something that gifted kids, perhaps skills that they do need to learn because things often come so easily to them. And you can overlay that with the stress or high expectation of this idea of potential, which gets talked about a lot with giftedness. And I completely agree with you in terms of I don't like the word potential. And I know sometimes and I know in the UK, they don't use gifted, they say high learning potential. And while I don't like the label gifted either, what I worry about the term potential is that sense of expectation I have to live up to that is imagined. And if I don't live up to that, therefore I'm failing and I'm not successful. And I just think that is a disaster waiting to happen. Like you say, we cannot look into tea leaves and see what is that potential, what is this mysterious, mythical thing that you're supposed to live up to. So I think that's a really crucial lesson for parents of gifted kids. So thank you for that. What advice do you have for parents? We've talked about effort already, and when things come so easily, it can be hard to actually build up that muscle of grit that you were talking about. So how do we as parents help our gifted kids have that sort of intrinsic motivation to make that effort when things get hard? And I guess it comes back to the motivation that we were talking about earlier.
Right. And it's a very good question. I think, first of all, parents have to make sure that the rules and the expectations are fitting and flexible. So those are 3 really important. Fitting, in other words, going back to that match between the learner and the learner's capacities and the kinds of opportunities that are being offered in terms of their learning. Fairness, that the timelines, the availability of materials, the availability of supports, those are there for the child if and when they need them. And also being flexible, having that opportunity to negotiate a little bit around timelines, or if there's a lot of creativity that all of a sudden comes to the fore, in the same way that Pauline all of a sudden wanted to try different things at night with the recording and so on, and taking maybe extra time to do that. So fit, fairness, and flexibility. Another thing is to pay very close attention to your child's skill levels. They may not have the same skill level in all different subject areas. So be aware of that. You might have a child who has what we call asynchronous development, which means that they may be terrific in math, but maybe not so good in some other areas. So keeping an eye out in terms of the domain of learning and making sure that whatever is being asked of them well suited to their capacities in that level. Also interest, whether or not the child is interested in what it is, that will of course motivate them as well. And their emotional strengths, what's going on in their lives. So with COVID and with all the uncertainty and vulnerability and so forth that's happening right now, that's right at the forefront of what's going on in schools and families, and the kinds of coping mechanisms that children have are very relevant, and how parents are modeling the kinds of coping mechanisms they themselves use, and what's happening within the family constellation, that dynamic, the nucleus, the safe haven of home, and whether or not that's being supportive of it. So those are important factors.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the creativity, what was it called? The Creativity Post.
I have over 70 articles in there. I write for them. I put a different column in every month. I've written about praise and reassurance and creativity and gifted learners, and like all kinds of things. So
Yeah.
again, I encourage people to go there, and all of this is accessible on my website. I have a resource page, and you can just click on and get my articles from the Creativity Post from there as well.
And I'll put the link to those
Sure.
pages
Okay.
in the show notes so everyone can have a look. I was actually having a look through the articles this morning, and there are lots of amazing articles there. One caught my eye on laziness, which I felt was topical because we were going to talk about effort. And that's a really great article, which I will put in the show notes too. And because it just kind of comes back to what you were saying about our current sense of well-being, given what a crazy year it's been with COVID. A lot of people have been in lockdown, homeschooling, or in and out of lockdown, or just a general sense of uncertainty. As we get to what is the end of the academic year here in Australia, although I know it's slightly different in the US and in the Northern Hemisphere, like our kids are knackered, as are we. And so when it comes to our expectation and what we're expecting the effort for our kids to put into school at the moment, or even stuff at home, we have lowered that benchmark. It's kind of like, as long as you're getting through the day, as long as you're getting to school, the benchmark is so low because the resilience is really down. I was talking to one of the teachers only a couple of days ago, and she was saying how one of my kids struggled with something at school because, they were doing this scavenger hunt and it wasn't in numerical order. And that was enough to do in that child. The fact that it was out of order, like my resilience is so low, I'm just going to put my hoodie up and shut down for a bit. And thankfully, the teachers at this particular school understand the children very well and could see that, okay, resilience is low over there. We'll let them just do what they need to. And then they rejoined and had a great day. But it was just acknowledging that even our kids, they need that rest.
Yes, everybody's frazzled. And we do have to make sure that there's time for life balance, for rest and reading and play, which is hugely important. We have to keep in mind children's past experiences. What sort of put them over the edge before? What are the strengths that they can call upon to make the day better? What kind of positive attitude can they bring forward and use as a way to propel them? What sort of work habits do they need additional help on? Are they disorganized these days? Do they need more help with time management, priorities, goal setting, those kinds of skill sets that may have somehow gotten sidelined or rocked in some way? They may need help. And really important, and we sometimes forget that, is please and thank. We're so busy going about our business and doing and expecting kids to do this, that, and the other, that sometimes what they just need is a time to pause, step back, step aside, and just say please and thank you. And can we talk and chat about things? Really important.
We're really feeling that at the moment. It feels like they're more knackered than usual. And I think the last couple of years are taking their toll on everyone, generally speaking.
What is knackered? And how do you spell it? I want to use it in my writing. I love it.
I have to say, it's one of my favorite words. I probably use it a lot. So it's
I've never heard it.
Knackered, knackered. And I guess it just means tired, but physically kind of exhausted as well as tired. So really at the end of your rope. Yeah. So
not being able to manage.
Yeah,
basically?
That's right. You're just tired,
Got it.
Physically excited. You can't manage. It's just like game over. Totally.
Got it. When I use it in my writing, I'm going to cite you. Is that okay?
It's totally fine. I love that. I love that.
That's why I asked how to spell it. I don't want to get it wrong.
No, that's great.
Well, sometimes too, when you're feeling knackered, the best thing is to be creative. To figure out a new way to do something, to take a little bit of time just to let things percolate.
Definitely.
We're all so busy rushing around and trying to accomplish things that, my goodness, it's only 24 hours in a day.
Exactly. I think we do demand too much of ourselves and our kids sometimes. And it's a good opportunity to reevaluate, I think, as you get to the end of the year and see what's essential and how can we lower those expectations, provide some space for a bit of creativity or rest. I wanted to ask you today as well, in the book that you've recently republished, it's called Being Smart About Gifted Learning, Empowering Parents and Kids Through Challenge and Change. You talk about something called the optimal match.
So I wanted to take the opportunity to have a little conversation about that, because I think that's a really interesting approach and for gifted kids. So tell us, what is that all about?
So it's really about being flexibly responsive to what children need and want to learn and finding opportunities to address those needs and wants and basically providing a range of options for kids. So I know it sounds like a lot of work because what do you mean a range of options? Let me just give them one and they'll be happy. And it doesn't work like that. But there are so many possibilities for learning, and children can also help co-create their learning. But if you stop to think about the kinds of opportunities that are out there, especially with technology, for example, there's a little girl I know who wanted to learn more about hieroglyphics. And so went online and contacted someone in Egypt who was a professor at a university who was kind enough to provide her with information on hieroglyphics. Another little girl wanted to learn about Russian literature. Teacher and her parents didn't know anybody who knew anything about Russian literature, but they found somebody at another school who knew somebody who did. So reaching out, finding mentors, finding cross grade resources, independent studies, finding things that need to be fixed, volunteering in the community, acceleration and enrichment in certain areas, if that's a possibility, entrepreneurial opportunities, leadership opportunities. In Being Smart About Gifted Learning, Donna Matthews and I spend 2 chapters on different kinds of learning opportunities that might be considered by parents, by teachers, by grandparents, by anybody who wants to help a child develop, and I'll go back to the word potential, again, that open-ended sense that you can do anything, you can be anything. It's interesting because going back to tenacity, the example I gave in that particular article that was posted today was that I can take a picture of a sunset by stepping outside, but I can also take a picture of a sunset by going someplace different and stretching my horizons. And maybe I can't find a beach or a mountain or a desert to do it in, but what else can I do? What is it that I can do to push my own limits, to stretch my horizons, and to be creative in new ways, and to make a better match for me, so that if somebody says, take a picture of a sunset, it's not boring and frustrating for me, but it's an expression of my soul, my spirit, my mind, my desires, my aspirations. If I want to play a harp, if I want to learn to skateboard, if I want to take up a sport that I've never tried before, what do I have to do? What are my steps? What do I have to explore? And how can my parents help me get there? So, an optimal match is a matter of finding what it is that you really are keen to learn to do, and then finding ways to do it.
So have you got any advice then for parents on different ways that they can help their child find those matches?
Discussion, first of all, around what it is they want to do and make sure that it's realistic. I
Mhm.
mean, someone who wants to ride a horse may not be able to have a horse. So you have to make sure that what they want to do is realistic and that there might be alternatives or there might be negotiation or compromises that need to be done. Keep in mind your own family dynamic and finances and what kinds of things you can realistically put in place. Because technology is there, we have opportunities to explore different options. So that makes it a little bit better. And again, the co-creation, the idea that children have to think about what really matters to them, and to build upon what it is they can already do. For example, let's say somebody wants to build a flying machine. Well, that's a great idea. Let's build a flying machine, but it's not going to happen unless you know a little bit about aerodynamics. You go online, you find out books, you learn what makes things fly. You build from what it is that you already know. And those are the beginning steps to work with. Help a child find their beginning steps before they try to hit the ground running.
I love that because we talk a lot about strength-based learning and supporting our kids in terms of focusing on their strengths and interests. So this feels like a really nice framework to lean on in order to support them in that way. You've mapped that out further with a bit of guidance for us and different kinds of ways that we can support our kids in their interests, because it can be a bit overwhelming for parents to kind of go, okay, where do I go from here? So it's really nice sometimes to have a bit of a roadmap of, okay, here's a whole bunch of options and ideas and strategies and tools. What's going to work for us as a family? What's going to be the right fit for my child, as well as, like you say, the family logistics as well.
Being open to possibilities, but making sure they're practical. That's really important. And also connecting with the teacher in ways that are meaningful, and advocating for more professional development for teachers as well, so that they can actually learn to differentiate for children more specifically and more broadly and more astutely. I think those are really important because we want to make sure that the teachers have the kinds of supports and tools and know how to be able to support children's learning in the best way possible. So parents can advocate, they can be open to possibilities, and they can look for activities that are multidimensional and that are exciting. We all like to do things that are exciting and fun and bring us joy. And kids are no different. You stick a pile of busy work in front of them, or you give them stuff that's boring, they're just going to tune out. So we can be better than that.
That's something that I always say is as well. We can do better. And so we've talked about how do we motivate our kids who might be suffering with a bit of lack of motivation? And we've talked about effort, and we've come around to this idea of the optimal match, and there are different ways and tools and strategies that we can use to inspire them and tap into that sort of sense of curiosity of the world and bring that learning back to life if they're struggling. And I think that's a really nice wraparound. And at the same time, acknowledging sometimes we do need a bit of downtime because we are knackered. Or in this household, scunner isn't another word that we use. My husband's Scottish.
Stop that one again.
Scunnet. It's a Scottish word, and it's similar to knackered, but I think it's even more exhausted. So scunnet.
Can you spell that, please?
I'm not sure that I can. I'll look it up.
Send me an email.
Yeah, I love it. It's very descriptive. This image of real exhaustion and just, nothing left in the tank. So words are great.
Love them. That's why I write.
And Joanne, you are a prolific writer. There's so many articles. I will absolutely share those links that we've talked about today, because there's a lot of great tips and strategies and tools for parents in all of those articles. And so I guess just as we wrap up, any kind of thoughts for parents on just those topics we've talked about effort and motivation and I guess rest?
Yeah, I think the first is that you have to create an environment of safety and trust for your child, that they know that at home they've got someone to go to, and they're always paddling so quickly, and just sometimes to acknowledge that they don't have to dazzle all the time, that it's okay, and at home it's secure and it's safe. And this is really important, like now, especially during these times of challenge and change that the whole world is going through. Stay attuned to your child's interests and abilities, and try to make that match between what it is they want to learn and need to learn and what it is that's being provided for them, bridging any gaps and paying attention to what is that they're wondering about. You mentioned curiosity, that sense of wonder, that knowledge acquisition, and also the skills that they might need in order to be able to next level, to go and advance themselves further. And I think what fits your child in the context of your family, which we mentioned. And I think setting good examples. Parents are in a good position to be able to set examples around how to cope, how to balance responsibilities, time management, time for play and reading and reflection, all those other things that are part of the real world. Academics in school is not everything. There's a whole lot more that goes on. So being aware of that, setting good examples, and showing too that you are a lifelong learner, you are creative, you are doing things that matter, because it's like when you go on an airplane and they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on before you put one on your child. It's the same thing. As parents, we need to look after ourselves, self-care, and making sure that we can breathe, that we're not so knackered that we're out. And I think that's a really important thing. So I guess the first one was safety and trust, an environment of safety and trust. The second is being attuned to your child. And the third is to be available and to set good examples around what it is that really matter in life.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you on all of those factors, and especially on putting the oxygen mask on yourself first. We all get worn down with challenging parenting, and it can be really hard. And we're not at our best as parents if our cup is empty. And it's hard to find time to remedy that, but definitely something that needs to be a priority, I think. Something I'm working on anyway.
We all are working on it these days. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's really tricky. It is really tricky. Figuring out what it is that rejuvenates you has been a topic. This whole year has been a question I've been asking myself, because I think especially as a parent and a mum, but I think at dads as well, you lose yourself for a long while as a parent, and then you need to figure out, what do I love? What rejuvenates me? And if I've got that spark, well, then I'm going to parent better because I'm going to be grounded and rested and coming from a better place. And that leads to our children feeling safer and supported and all of those things. So really great note to end on. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really lovely to have this chat with you and to dig a little bit deeper into some of those challenges around motivation and effort and finding those optimal matches for our kids. And I'll definitely put links into your books as well.
Okay.
Yeah, because a great opportunity for parents to find a roadmap there and lots of tools and strategies and ideas to put these things into practice. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And I've learned 2 new words too.
No, it's a good day. I'll put...
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been a treat. And I just want to take a minute to thank you for all that you do for the gifted community, the information that you share, the opportunities you provide for people to be able to express themselves and convey information and basically to connect and strengthen one another. So that's a really important job that you do, and you do it so well. So thank you.
Oh, no worries. It's an absolute privilege. Well, let's have a quick chat about them now. So I've got 3 questions about procrastination, if you're okay to answer those. The first one is, well, what is procrastination?
Procrastination is willfully putting something off, task avoidance. There are many different reasons for it, but basically it's saying, I don't want to do this right now or maybe at all, and postponing it. So it's a delay of action, but it's a conscious delay of action. And the reasons for it, are you going there? Is that going to be your next question?
Yeah.
So there are many different reasons. In Bust Your Butts, I talk about 28 of them actually, and I talk in detail about them. They could be skill related. So it may have something to do with lack of confidence or lack of being able to do a particular task because you don't have the knowledge to do it, how to organize, prioritize, whatever it might be. It could be personal. So you might feel lazy, or you might have a fear of failure or a fear of success, or it could be external. So other people who are bothering you, parents who procrastinate, distractions that are out there. There are many different reasons. And I should mention too that in a lot of cases, procrastination is legit. In other words, the reasons why kids may not want to do something could be because they want to think about it more, let it rumble around in their heads a little bit before they may want to find more information. They may, like Pauline, not have found the right avenue yet. They might find it boring or frustrated or whatever. Procrastination does have benefits, but it's the downside that's problematic. The fact that other people might be relying on you, or you might short circuit your advancement, or you might be missing a learning opportunity. Those kinds of things are what make procrastination problematic.
So is it related to perfectionism?
It can be. There are some kids who just won't tackle something because if it's not going to be perfect, I am not going to do it at all. If I can only get 70%, I'm not interested in doing it. I will only do it if I know for a fact that I can master it and that I can get 100%. And so some kids do back off because of that. There is that connection, but that's not necessarily the only reason for procrastinating.
Yeah. And so you've written 2 books about procrastination, Not Now, Maybe Later, and Bust Your Butts. Tell us a little bit about those 2 books.
Well, Not Now, Maybe Later came about after I was doing some presentations on the topic, and I did one at National Association for Gifted Children, and my publisher was there, and he saw that the room was busy and said, this is a hot button, and will you please write a book on procrastination? And my response was, well, not now, maybe later, because I was working on another book, which was Beyond Intelligence at the time. And then subsequently, I did write Not Now, Maybe Later, and this one is all about different ways that parents can support children who are just not motivated and do not put forth the effort. Then subsequent to that, I ended up breaking my ankle twice, and because once is not enough. And I was sitting in a chair, and I love to write. And I decided at the end of the day, children must be accountable for their own actions. And so I wrote Bust Your Butts. And Bust Your Butts is the book that is written for children, primarily 10 and up. But I specifically say, and I'm going to just share this with you at the very beginning, I write something where I say, bust your butts. Whose butts? And by the way, this is BUTS. Okay, this book is for kids to keep on their shelves, but adults who read it just might see themselves. Procrastination occurs at all ages, but if you want strategies, check out these pages. Read this together or have a quick look. but don't put off using the tips in this book. So basically what I say is that this is a book for kids, but it's also really pertinent for adults, because if you can understand what is causing your child to procrastinate, first of all, you're better equipped to help them. And second of all, you may just see yourself.
Yeah, that's great. So you've got the books there. Show us, hold them up for us so we can see them.
You want me to hold them up?
Yeah.
So this is Bust Your Butts.
Now, tips for teens who procrastinate.
Yes, but it's actually for 10 and over. And I was very appreciative. This one actually won an award from the Independent Book Publishers Association. So this got a Benjamin Franklin Award. And there's some interesting Benjamin Franklin quotes too about procrastination, by the way. This is Not Now, Maybe Later. So these are a pair that go together. And I should mention that it's kind of cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that says it all, doesn't it?
It does say it all. And I like, and it's got, both of them have the Dali clock on the back, that dripping clock. Yeah. And then Being Smart About Gifted Learning is my most recent book. And this one also has an entire chapter on, so there's information there, not only about procrastination and perfectionism and effort and resilience and so on, but a lot more. So
a great resource. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for letting me share that.
No, thank you for sharing. That sounds great. It's always great to find good books that really have lots of tools and strategies to help. So thank you so much for your time today. That's wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.